Good morning. Yep, Uncle Lou here. That's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Top 10 poll up today. First month or so, or a couple of months or whatever. I don't know. I did this on a Friday. Last week I did it on Tuesday. I think it works better that way. No sense in waiting until the end of the week to do the poll, so Tuesday's a good day to do it. Top 10 poll, Uncle Lou. Don't forget, this poll matters. It's the only poll that matters. Forget the AP, the coaches, the power rankings, the FPI. Nothing else matters. This is the official college football poll. So these teams that I have here in the top 10, these are the real top 10 teams. I'll give reasons, as usual, why each team is ranked where they are. And these reasons are scientific and factual, based off of years and years of research and development and various calculated algorithms and things of this nature. Pythagoras himself could not come up with a better formula for ranking the top 10 than Uncle Lou does. I'm going to do one thing a little bit different this week that I don't normally do. I'm going to talk about one team that's not in my top 10, and I'm going to tell you why they're not. The reason I'm doing this, two reasons. Number one, this team is undefeated. Number two, they're in the top 10 in any other poll you look in. I'm going to tell you why they're not in Uncle Lou's poll, and that is the U. The Miami Hurricanes. Good morning, Uncle U here. Yep, the U. Why don't I have them in my top 10? Well, the answer is simple. They're not a good team. Okay? Don't tell me that they're undefeated. I know that. You don't have to waste your time telling me that. Watch a Miami Hurricanes game. Okay? The same things that I've been trying to tell people about Penn State also apply to Miami in reverse. Penn State was not getting the recognition from a lot of people that they deserve. Now, they were ranked high in the two major polls, but I'm talking about like regular people, comment section type individuals. Talked about Penn State and didn't know what they were talking about. If you're one of those type of people, don't try to tell me that Miami is a top 10 team, because if you do, you have not watched any football this year, or at least you have not watched any Miami Hurricanes football this year. I will admit, I have not watched as much of the Miami Hurricanes as I have of most of the other teams in the top 10. I will admit that. But I've seen large portions of several of their games. Georgia Tech game, Florida State game, some of the Syracuse game this past weekend. I've seen enough of Miami to form an educated and expert to opinion. And like I said, this is not up for dispute. Miami is not a top 10 team. Where is Miami's good win? Tell me where Miami's good win is this year. Now, a good win really can mean a couple of different things. It can mean a win over another good team or great team, or it can mean blowing out average to below average teams. Miami has done neither of those two things. Neither. Now, people will say, well, Alabama hasn't played that good of a schedule either. I agree. But Alabama's beating people by 30, 40, and 50 points. UGA beating people by 30, 40, and 50 points. TCU running over people. Penn State beat Michigan by 4 or 5 touchdowns. Where is Miami's good win? Miami has been behind in the majority of games that they've played this year in the second half against bad teams. That win against Georgia Tech was a miracle. There's no other word to describe it. And if you didn't watch the game, don't bother typing about it. That catch that guy made down the sideline is an incomplete pass 99 times out of 100. Okay? Miami is just not a good team. Watch them play. There is not a single team in the top 10 that Miami would be favored against. Not one. And I don't think there's a single team in the top 10 that Miami would actually beat. Even at home. Miami has no home field advantage. We all know that. They're selling tickets for $7 a piece and can't get 25,000 people to show up. And they're undefeated and ranked in the top 10 in meaningless polls. Not in Uncle Lou's poll, which is one that matters. So, that's why I don't have Miami in the top 10. Now, that's the bad news if you're a Miami fan. The good news is, if you're a Miami fan, in the end, it doesn't matter. If you barely beat every crappy team you play and somehow manage to beat any of the good ones that you play and you go undefeated and win the ACC championship game, you'll be in the playoff. So, no sense getting butthurt about it now. Breaking news and spoiler alert, though, that ain't happening. You got a couple of L's on your schedule. I don't want to say any names, but one of them rhymes with Notre Dame. How bad are they going to beat you? I think that's in Miami. Matters not. You'll get run out of your own stadium. But anyway, point is, I tell you what, I make a deal with Miami fans right now. If y'all beat Notre Dame, not only will I put you in the top 10, if you're undefeated and beat Notre Dame, I'll put Miami in the top 5. I'll make that deal with you, but it's not happening. Anyway, let's get on to today's scientific poll. I wrote it down. Can't memorize this crap. Way too busy and important to try to do anything like that. Number 10. Actually, let's do it this way today. 10, 9, and 8. Number 10, number 9, number 8. 10, Ohio State. 9, Oklahoma. 8, Oklahoma State. Why? Most people got Ohio State ranked higher. Yeah, most people do. And Ohio State's been blowing people out lately. But Ohio State has one loss. Oklahoma has one loss. Oklahoma beat them head-to-head. So, until that changes, until one of these teams loses another, if Oklahoma loses again, okay, fine, all bets are off. And the way they've been playing lately, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm not ranking Ohio State ahead of Oklahoma as long as they each have one loss. It's just not happening. They played head-to-head. That has to mean something. I mean, you want to talk about the transitive property, and this team beat that team, and that team beat that team, so that means the other team can beat the first team. I get all that. Doesn't make any sense. But don't tell me you can't judge two teams based off head-to-head. Of course you can. Of course you can. And Ohio State didn't barely lose to Oklahoma on the road. They got blown out by Oklahoma at home. I mean, they just humiliated. So it makes absolutely no sense to me to see any poll at all with Ohio State ranked ahead of Oklahoma. And I'm no Oklahoma fan. The Big 12, I hate the Big 12. It's garbage. They shouldn't even be a Power 5 conference. But these two teams have one loss, played head-to-head, and what happened? We saw what happened. So that's why this ranking here is what it is. So Ohio State, 10? Yep, Oklahoma 9, Oklahoma State 8. Well, why is Oklahoma State ranked ahead of both of them? Oklahoma State hasn't played either one of those teams. Why you got them at 8, Uncle Lou? Well, Oklahoma State also has a loss, but who's it to? Well, it's to TCU. TCU's undefeated. So that's a better loss, in my opinion. I think they lost by 13 to TCU. That's a better loss. TCU's undefeated. Most people would agree they're a top 4, maybe 5 team right now. That's Oklahoma State's only loss. Now, some of this stuff is going to sort itself out. Oklahoma still has to play TCU, and Oklahoma still has to play Oklahoma State. So this stuff's going to work itself out. So don't spend too much time getting yourself all aggravated about where Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are ranked in relation to Ohio State. Now, they say, well, Uncle Lou, what if Ohio State beats Penn State this weekend? Well, if Ohio State beats Penn State, then I'll have to move Ohio State up, which means I'll also have to move Oklahoma up. I'm still not putting Ohio State ahead of Oklahoma if they both have one loss. So, cross that bridge when we get there type of deal. Ohio State gets Penn State at home. That's the game of the week. Should be a good game. I think Penn State's a better team than Ohio State, without question. I'm convinced. I'm a believer in Ohio State. I'm not going to make a prediction on this game. I'll do a prediction video later in the week. Penn State's got a brutal 3-game stretch. At home last week against Michigan, on the road this week against Ohio State, on the road the following week against Michigan State. They go undefeated in those 3 games, they'll probably be number 1 in the Uncle Lou poll. That's just the reality of the situation. The odds of that happening are not good in my opinion. But like I said, we'll cross that when we get there. Oklahoma, they play Texas Tech this week, a 500 team. You should beat them. Of course, Oklahoma's played a lot of teams you should beat and somehow managed to scrape by. How about let's get a blowout, Oklahoma? Oklahoma State plays at West Virginia. This will be a good game. 2 high-powered offenses. It's on the road. Would I be shocked if Oklahoma State lost this game? No. Probably could go either way. Again, I'll make an official prediction on this game later in the week. All right, so that's 10, 9, and 8. Number 7, Clemson. I moved them up. I think I had them at 10 last week after losing to Syracuse on the road. Maybe a little bit of an overreaction on my part. They did lose their quarterback during that game. And if the College Football Playoff Committee has stated that they're going to take injuries into account when ranking these teams, then I figured maybe Uncle Lou better ought to do the same. So I reconsidered where I had Clemson, and I've decided to move them back up ahead of those other 3 teams. So they're sitting at number 7 in the Uncle Lou poll, Clemson with 1 loss to Syracuse. They've still got a couple of tough games down the road coming up, plus probably an ACC title game at some point. I wouldn't say Clemson is out of it as far as making a playoff, but they've got no more margin for error. They've got to run the table now. They were off last week. They play Georgia Tech at home. This week, Clemson should beat Georgia Tech. Of course, Georgia Tech has that tricky offense, and if they catch a defense sleeping, it can be a long day. I don't expect that to happen against Clemson. Clemson's got a pretty good front 7. I think they'll be able to slow Georgia Tech down enough to probably win that game. But we'll see if Paul Johnson's got any tricks in his bag. I don't know. Official prediction on that video coming later in the week, too. So what's that? 10, 9, 8, 7. Number 6, Wisconsin. You know, I almost feel sorry for Wisconsin. They beat Maryland 38-13. They play at Illinois this week. So, again, another weekend will go by on SportsCenter where you hear very little to nothing about Wisconsin. Wisconsin is probably... Oh, there's no probably. Wisconsin is definitely the undefeated team that gets the least amount of coverage or hype. When people talk about the Big Ten, Wisconsin is usually about the 4th team they name. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and then they'll say, oh, by the way, Wisconsin won again. Whether or not that's fair is not the point. That's just sort of the way it is. They're flying under the radar. They're undefeated. I talked about it in the preseason. Their schedule is a joke and ridiculous. I don't expect them to lose a game, really. Maybe one during the regular season. No excuse for Wisconsin not making the Big Ten title game, though. Their season really, in my mind, comes down to that one game. I don't see any way Wisconsin doesn't end up in the Big Ten title game. Only question is going to be who they play out of Penn State and Ohio State. That's the only question. Penn State undefeated, Ohio State with 1 loss, but it's a non-conference loss. So Penn State and Ohio State tied for first right now in their division in the Big Ten. They play this weekend. The winner will jump into first place. But again, the winner will have no room for error. The winner drops another game, then, you know, we're right back to square one again. So we'll see how it goes. Number 5, I had to move Notre Dame up. They absolutely destroyed Southern Cal this past weekend. Now, Southern Cal is a team that I've been hard on, and I think for good reason. They started out ranked top 4 or 5 in the country. You know, they've looked bad at times. They've looked good at times. I still don't understand how they dominated Stanford like they did, because you look at the Pac-12 now, and it looks like Stanford might be the best team, but Southern Cal dominated them. But then, you know, close games with Texas, which isn't a very good team. You know, they get absolutely destroyed by Notre Dame. I had to move Notre Dame up to number 5 here. I think Notre Dame right now is the best one-loss team. If you want to use my Miami example in reverse, Notre Dame fits it pretty good. Notre Dame has blowed out every team they've played, with the exception of UGA, where they lost by 1 point at home. So I think that's the best loss in America right now. That's the best loss. Notre Dame losing to UGA is the best loss because UGA is a really good team. You want to make an argument for Oak State losing to TCU? Okay, but they lost by 13. Don't tell me Clemson has the best loss to Syracuse. Don't tell me Ohio State has the best loss to Oklahoma. They got, you know, that was a blowout. Not trying to hear any of that. Just keeping it real. Notre Dame is the best one-loss team in America. They have the best loss. I think they deserve to be ranked number 5. If they run the table, as much as I hate Notre Dame and think that historically over the last 20 years they're drastically overrated, if Notre Dame runs the table, they deserve to be in the college football playoff. Now, they've got a tough stretch of games coming up. They play Miami. Who else do they play? They only still play NC State. Right? Is that this weekend? That might be this weekend. Yeah. They get NC State at home. NC State, another weird team. Undefeated, except for an unexplainable loss week 1 to South Carolina. A game they dominated in every possible way other than the one that matters in the end, which is the scoreboard. But NC State has been a pretty good team this year. They've got a good front 7. I like what they do on offense. I think this will probably be Notre Dame's toughest game other than the UGA game. So we'll see. It's on the road for them at NC State. I can tell you right now, NC State's going to be hyped up. They're thinking if they can win this game, they'll jump into the top 10, and they might be right. So I think this will be a good game this weekend. It comes on at 3:30, I think. Official prediction on that game later in the week, but that's one of the best games of the week to keep an eye on right there for sure. All right, now the top four: TCU 4, Penn State 3, UGA 2, Bama 1. I easily could have moved Penn State up to number 2. I probably could have moved Penn State up to number 1. And there can be arguments made for that. And the reason I didn't is just a couple of things here. Not UGA's fault, they were on a bye week. So I tried to ask myself, okay, UGA's winning every game they play by an average of 30 points. If UGA would have played last weekend and won by 30, would I have moved Penn State ahead of UGA? Probably not. Probably not. Alabama beat Tennessee 45-7. That's a blowout. I give the Gumps a hard time with the whole average deal and how could you let Tennessee score. But if I'm being realistic, you beat somebody by 38 points, it's a blowout, okay? Georgia beat them by 41. Tennessee, I'm talking about. Alabama beat them by 38. I mean, these are blowout type games. When a game gets up into the 35 to 40 point range, it could easily be 50, 60, or 70. I mean, these teams change up their offense late in the second half, early in the second half. If you're playing Tennessee, you're putting the substitutes in. You're running the ball every time instead of throwing it. You're slow. You're speeding the game up by letting the play clock wind down, things like that. So listen, it just didn't make any sense. Alabama didn't do anything to deserve to lose their number 1 spot. UGA didn't do anything. UGA was on a bye week. Penn State did have an impressive win, but they play Ohio State this week. They beat Ohio State. There'll be some movement in the top 3 or 4 next week. I promise you. I promise you. So, like I said, prediction on that game later in the week. TCU, I left it, or I have it number 4. I don't see TCU losing a game. They've been the most consistently dominant team in the Big 12 this year. Oklahoma State's got a great offense. They've had several games where they've put up 59 points and blown people out, and they've had other games where they inexplicably barely win. Oklahoma, same thing. Beats the brakes off Ohio State on the road, turns around and loses at home to something called Iowa State. TCU's been consistent all year. They got a blowout win over Arkansas, another Power 5 team. They've blown out the majority of Big 12 teams they've played. They look like a complete team. I still don't think they have an elite defense. I don't think anybody in the Big 12 has an elite defense, but TCU is the closest thing to it. So they're going to have an edge defensively over any team they play in the Big 12. And I just don't see them losing a game. The problem TCU is going to run into is whoever they play in the Big 12 title game, it will be the second time they've played them. So coaching adjustments, it's hard to beat a team twice, these sorts of things that you hear all the time. So we'll see if they make it all the way through 13-0. But I can't see them right now losing in the regular season. I just don't see it happening. Who do they play this week? They play at Iowa State. Iowa State's in the top 25 these days. I think they're number 24, 25 this week in the AP poll. Of course, I mentioned beat Oklahoma. TCU should beat them, and it shouldn't be close. Like I said, they've been the most consistently dominant team in the Big 12. So, you want to keep your top 4 ranking. You want to continue to prove that you're worthy of a playoff spot, even though you play in the garbage Big 12. Go out and dominate Iowa State. Georgia was off last week. They play Florida this week. Florida's having a down year. Matters not. Been plenty of times when Georgia was elite or very, very, very good and gone to Jacksonville as a favorite and left with an L. I don't expect that to happen this year. You can say the same thing about Georgia and Alabama that you can say about TCU. Doesn't matter who they play, they blow them out. They don't play down to the level of their competition. I don't expect anything different this weekend from Georgia. I think they're favored. Vegas odds, I think, have Georgia favored by somewhere between 13 and 15 points, depending on where you look. I think Georgia wins this game by 21 plus. I don't think it'll be close. No sense in saving my prediction for that game. You already know. Talked about it yesterday on the video anyway. So we'll see what that does for them next week in the poll. And number 1, Alabama destroyed Tennessee. They're off this week. No reason to move them down. So you got Bama number 1, Georgia 2, Penn State 3, TCU 4, Notre Dame 5, Wisconsin 6, Clemson 7, Oklahoma State 8, Oklahoma 9, Ohio State 10. Miami not in the top 10 because they suck and barely beat crappy teams.